Hello, I'm Susan Dixon with the Chinese Historical Society, and I am the current program chair. And I want to welcome everybody to our exciting presentation tonight. Uh, Curtis is really going to be introducing himself, but I want to just put an aside and a plug for he he was interviewed for our Gumsan Journal issue in 2023. So if you would like to read it, you can access it through a link on our website, or um, we have a dedicated Gumsan Journal website, which is gumsanjournal.com. And I want to thank Susie Ling, who's the editor of Gumsan Journal, for asking Curtis to be with us tonight. So, Curtis, you're on.
Hi, thank you, Susan. I'm so happy to be here with you all tonight. I really love your organization. You guys are doing such great work, and so happy to be in conversation with you all. As Susan said, my name is Curtis Chin, and I am the author of a memoir called Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. And as the title of the book says, I grew up in a Chinese restaurant, but I like to think of it as not just any Chinese restaurant. I like to think of it as the Chinese restaurant in Detroit. And the way I sort of gauge that is I start off by asking people to guess how many egg rolls you think we sold in the 65 years that we own this family business. And if you read the book already, you can't guess. Are you guys able to chime in and talk, or do you guys just want to type it in the chat?
Probably for now, we'll have people type in, but maybe we might open it up later.
Oh, okay. I don't know what the capability is. Yeah, type in what you guess. So now these are all handmade. Even the skin. My grandmother would make the skin fresh. She made the sauce fresh too. So these are really, really delicious egg rolls. Any guesses how many we made in 65 years?
Well, let's give everyone a moment here. We'll ask the question. I think people are still streaming in, so
Okay.
yeah.
You want to wait a second?
Yeah, well, let's just ask the question again. Over 65 years?
Yeah, sure. So my family owned this really wonderful restaurant in Detroit called Chung's that was founded by my great-grandfather in 1940. And it was really an iconic Chinese restaurant. And I just threw out the question, how many egg rolls do you think we sold in those 65 years?
500,000.
We actually sold over 10 million egg rolls.
Wow.
These are really, really good egg rolls, and they're so delicious. So it was a great place to grow up because I got all this wonderful Chinese food that I got to eat, despite the fact that my hometown of Detroit was going through a lot of difficulties at that time. The 80s were really, really hard for Detroit. The auto industry was really struggling, which led to a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment because the Japanese car companies had overtaken the American car companies in production, which also then led to a lot of anti-Asian violence. Not only that, crack cocaine was ravaging the city and also AIDS. I knew 5 people murdered by the time I was 18 years old, including Vincent Chin. My uncle was his best man. And so it was a case that really shaped my childhood. But despite all these challenges of growing up in Detroit, I feel like I had a great childhood. That's because of this wonderful Chinese restaurant that my parents, were able to raise me and my 5 siblings. And so this book really is a thank you to my parents for working so hard and sacrificing and giving me and my siblings these wonderful opportunities in life. And so I'm going to start off today and read a little bit just from the prologue, and then Eugene, who I'm sure all of you all are familiar with, is going to join me in a little conversation about the book. Okay? So the book is divided into 3 sections of 8 stories each, 888, because hopefully you guys all know that's good luck to Chinese people. It's 8 stories in elementary, middle school, 8 in high school, and then 8 in college. But I started off the prologue really talking about my family. And there are 2 reasons for this. Whenever you learn about Asian American history, for the most part, it's centered on California or the West, right? And maybe sometimes New York, maybe Hawaii, but you don't really think about Asians or Chinese people being in the Midwest as early as the 1800s. But that's where my family was. And so I wanted to honor that history. The second reason is that I don't think you can know a person's story unless you know the family's history, right? because so much about the values that you have, the things that you aspire to, are really shaped by your family. And so that's why I really want to start off my book talking about them. Okay? So I'm going to start reading now. So this is just the first page from the book. Everything I learned in a Chinese restaurant. Welcome to Chung's. Is this for here to go? Armed with a smile and a red waiter's jacket with a perpetual plum sauce stain. That's how my dad greeted any new face who entered the lobby of our popular Chinese restaurant in Detroit. Interestingly, my great-great-grandpa Gong Li Chin had faced this same question in the late 1800s as he stood cold and alone on a rickety dock in Guangzhou, China, trying to decide his future and that of his young impoverished family. For here to go. For here to go. As I got older, it was a question I asked myself. Starting in our restaurant's long and open back kitchen, where my family made some of our most popular items, including the tangiest barbecue pork and best-smelling almond cookies, my mom taught me my first lessons. Before diving into math, English, and geography, she began with a little American history, tales of elders and ancestors, our family as prologue. And so the prologue really just follows that family journey to the Midwest. It starts off with Gong Li Chin and how he moved from Canton, China to Canton, Ohio, before realizing there weren't actually Chinese people there. And then he moved up to Detroit. At that time, the auto industry was just starting. He tried to get a job in one of the factories, but unfortunately, there was a lot of discrimination against those early Chinese immigrants. And so he took one of the few jobs available, which was the hand laundry, right? And he worked really hard, saved up his money, and was able to eventually open up his own laundromat. And why that is so significant is because when the United States enacted the Chinese Exclusion Act, there were actually two exceptions. I don't have to say what the Chinese Exclusion Act is, right? You guys all know what that is, right? I'm assuming in this group. So the Chinese Exclusion Act had two exceptions, right? One was for education, right? Like if you're a student. And the second was if you owned your own business, because the Chinese Exclusion Act really was a labor-oriented, a law. And so because he owned his own business, he was able to bring over his son and eventually his grandson to join him in the family business. And so my great-grandfather, Joe, is the one that was really the entrepreneur, because he expanded and he went from the laundromat to opening up a grocery store and then eventually restaurants as early as the 30s. The one that I grew up in was opened in 1940, and it really was a special restaurant. As I was telling you guys before, everybody went there. From the mayor on down to the pimps and prostitutes, and the prologue continued all the way up to the 60s, when America was going through the civil rights struggle at that time, and there was a lot of violence in the cities. And Detroit got hit particularly hard. Buildings were being burnt down, and people were being killed in the streets. And the National Guard had to be called in, and they shut down the whole city for 5 days. And so my parents had to close the restaurant for 5 days. And, Chinese restaurants, they never close, right? And so that was really hard for them. But at the same time, in those 5 days, my parents found time to have sex. And 9 months later, I was born as their riot baby. And sometimes people ask me, oh, why do you talk about racial justice and social, justice so much? And I always say, well, without that incident, I probably wouldn't be around. So it's kind of in my DNA. And so that is the book. It's called Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. It came out actually in the October 2023, so about a year and a half now. And I literally have done over 300 events now, everywhere from Korea to Germany, talking about the book. In May, I'm going back to Europe. I've got another 21 events in the Netherlands, Belgium, France, and the UK, including Oxford University. The book has been really embraced by the home state of Michigan. It was picked for what's called the Great Michigan Read by the Humanities Department of the state. And so what that means, they choose one book every 2 years, and they buy 6,000 copies, and then they put me on a tour of the state. So my book was chosen for this next cycle. It's just been a really incredible run. So many awards. I'm going to Boston next week because the Association of American Studies is giving me an award for my book. So I'm just happy to be here with you all to talk about Chinese food, Chinese restaurants, and Detroit.
Let me sort of continue, well, or maybe start the dialogue here. Uh, this is a good introduction, Curtis, and I appreciate your really taking time out of your really busy schedule, because I've seen your itinerary. It's it's an amazing tour that you're doing. I understand that you're going to Europe next, right? But I think one of the reasons that attracted me to the story is that so many of my friends, including my wife sitting beside me here, grew up in a restaurant. And I think from the title of your book, basically you're talking about life's lessons that you learned growing up in the restaurant. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the things that you really learned. You know, how did it shape you as a human being? What did it, you know, I mean, other than the fact that, yeah, sure, there were riots and other incidents, other things going on in the larger world, but maybe in your immediate neighborhood, you know, the customers who came in, what did they teach you? Or what did you learn from them? You know, when you greeted, well, said, welcome to Chung's, you know, what was their expectation? And what did you feed the customers, by the way? Other than egg rolls, you know, what was your favorite menu item? Tell us about that.
I think you just gave me like 5 questions. Okay. Well, first of all, if there are any other Chinese restaurant kids here, feel free to type in the chat the name of your family's restaurant and what city they were in, because I love hearing stories about that. That's actually been one of the greatest things about like this book tour that I've been on. Actually, the New York Times actually just did a 2-page profile on me about a month ago, because I've been going, instead of just going to bookstores and colleges and corporations, I've actually been going to a lot of Chinese restaurants to do these book talks. And instead of talking about my book, I've actually been interviewing the owners and asking them about their stories. And so I'm just really fascinated by all this, this history of Chinese restaurants. In terms of the lessons that I've learned growing up there, God, there's so many. I mean, that's what the whole book is about, right? And sometimes they're big lessons, and sometimes they're small lessons. I know that, like, they're cooking lessons, right? Like simple things. Like I have this one, and I'll just drop them in throughout. Like how sometimes the smallest ingredients, like salt or pepper, actually has the biggest impact on the taste of things. Little things, about life. But I would have to say that the biggest lesson that I learned growing up actually came from my dad, and that was working in the dining room because my dad was the head waiter. But a lot of times when you're growing up, your parents will say, "Don't talk to strangers." My dad gave me the exact opposite advice. He said, "Talk to strangers," and who he was talking about were the people sitting in our dining room. Because my dad was a kid from Chinatown. He never, left. He was born and raised in Chinatown. Never really left. Um, but it was always amazing to me how he could strike up a conversation with somebody, anybody, and just make a connection with them. And I just thought that was an incredible thing. And so anytime my dad met somebody who he thought had an interesting, job or just was in a really good mood, he'd call all 6 of us kids to run over and join them. And my dad, we would then barrage these customers with questions of like, what do you do for a living? How did you get your job? How much money do you make? And so, oh, thanks, people are chiming in. But that idea of being able to talk to people who are different from you is just a skill that my dad, showed us, and the importance of it. And not only that, the idea of not being afraid to ask questions when you don't know something, or not being afraid to ask for help when you need it. I mean, these are golden gifts that I feel like my dad gave me, and it's allowed me to sort of have the life that I've had and open up doors for me, which might not have been a place where you expect to see, a kid from a Chinese restaurant, right? And so that's probably the greatest lesson that I learned from my dad. Oh, you also had another question about food. Yeah, God, food is so important. I mean, obviously, when you run a Chinese restaurant, and maybe some of the other people here are Chinese restaurant kids can attest to this too, is that so much of it is just revolved around food, right? Like you show up to the restaurant in the morning and immediately you're prepping all the food to cook, all throughout the day you're serving food or you're preparing food, like, peeling the pea pods or cleaning the shrimp or whatever, all the way to the end when at the end of the night when you're preparing the restaurant for the next day. I mean, it's all about food. And so, our family didn't have a lot of money growing up, but the one thing we always did have was food, and that's why my parents never really put limitations on us, like in terms of whatever we want to eat at the restaurant or whenever we want to try something. They were just totally all for it. And one of the other lessons that I've learned about food is something that happened on one of the book tours that I've done. Is that I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it was a packed reading at this bookstore. And at the end of the evening, this 60-year-old white woman gets up and she's like, has anybody here ever eaten at Chung's? And we're in Massachusetts, so nobody had. But she said, I grew up in Detroit. Your family's restaurant was my favorite restaurant, our family's favorite restaurant growing up. We went there every Sunday night. And then she said, I told my mom I was coming to this reading by one of the kids from Chung's, and her mom, who has dementia now, started recounting all of the dishes in vivid details, all her favorite dishes. And the woman said for the first time in years, she felt like she had her mom back. And that was a very touching story for me because I always knew that my parents were working really hard in that restaurant to support our family, to make sure that, we would have opportunities. Um, but I never really thought what my parents are doing meant to the city of Detroit. Because remember, Detroit was really falling apart at that time, right? I mean, like the population was dwindling, literally buildings burning left and right all the time. But my parents were providing this wonderful space for people in Detroit to come and have a good meal, a hot meal, something, for their family and something to connect to the history of Detroit. And it's just made me appreciate my parents' sacrifices so much more now as I get older, and thanks to the book. And so I think that's something that we as Chinese restaurant kids should be proud of. Not just for what these restaurants did for us and the opportunities provided, but what these Chinese restaurants represent to America, right? Um, and I jokingly say this, but it's like we live in a very divided country right now. But Chinese restaurants are one of the few places where you can go in and see people from different races, religious, socioeconomic backgrounds, and you know, uh, maybe if you just went into the restaurant and you just had a conversation with one of the strangers, maybe these are the baby steps that our country needs to take to sort of heal each other. So, you know, maybe it's the Chinese restaurant that's going to save America. That's what I sort of think about it.
Tell us a little bit about the demographics of your customers. You mentioned the mayor a moment ago, a little while ago. Uh, what was the ethnic or demographic mix?
Well, I mean, the restaurant was located in the inner city of Detroit, a predominantly black neighborhood. But yet at the same time, like the city of Detroit, it was a very segregated city. Like you'd have a lot of white collar white people working during the day in the city, but then at 6 o'clock they would leave. So it really kind of depended on what time of day you were there. But it was really, really quite diverse. I mean, amongst black, white, and Jewish people, there are very, very few Asians. It was Detroit. Anytime an Asian came into the restaurant, we all got excited.
What were the other Asian businesses surrounding you? There was a Chinatown, but I know that it was maybe shrinking over
But
time.
Detroit had an original old Chinatown that was located by the old Irish area of town called the Irish area was called Corktown, and this first Chinatown was located there. And that was thriving to the point, I think that they estimated that at some point it had 4,000 people. So it was quite large, right? And it sort of peaked in the 40s and 50s. And, much like with white flight, that population started to dwindle. And then when the city of Detroit decided to build freeways to connect the downtown core with the homes in the suburbs, they demolished the Chinatown. At the same time, they demolished the black neighborhood called Black Bottom or Paradise Valley, and both of those communities moved to another low income area called the Cass Corridor. And so that's sort of where I grew up. The Chinatown in the Cass Corridor was originally developed as an international district. They had drafted up plans for it, but like with most projects in Detroit, it never came to fruition. But some people did move over. So growing up, it was a Pan-Asian existence. I mean, I would say out of the two or three hundred Asians in that area. About 75% were probably Chinese, but the other 25% were Filipino, Indian, Afghan. So it was a mix there.
Did you have a grocery store, a Chinese grocery, or a laundry next door? Who were some of the other tenants in the block? What were some of the names of some of the families who were there? And by the way, I'm sorry, I keep asking 5 questions at a time, but you're a Chin, but the restaurant's name is Chung's. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm going to keep these answers on a more historical bent because of the organization, I guess, because I feel like that's what you guys all are interested in, the historical stuff. So there were two grocery stores there. Well, actually, one. So okay, when I was really, really young, right? Like in the 70s, there were about six restaurants, right? Five Chinese restaurants and an Indian restaurant. That constituted Chinatown, right? The Asian community there. There was also a medicine shop and a barbecue shop and a magazine shop, right? And a kung fu studio and a community center. That was the existence of Chinatown. But by the time you get to the 80s, just a scant 10. So there was a murder that happened in Detroit in 76, where one of the restaurant owners was killed in a robbery. And that actually led to the decline of that area. Sometimes people think like it was the Vincent Chin case, but it wasn't. It was the murder of Tommy Lee, the restaurant owner. And then the family started to leave Chinatown. And that's when, like the Sunday school closed. We used to have like an annual autumn a moon festival, right? They'd have a Chinese beauty contest. We had all that stuff, right? We used to have a gambling den in our basement, which was run by On Lang. I don't know if was On Lang big in Los Angeles? On Lang?
Onland was not here. It
Oh,
was big in the Midwest.
Yeah. Yeah, but those things all started to disappear. Our restaurant was the last restaurant standing. Um, and then there was one grocery store that was operated by a Canadian family, actually from Toronto. They had moved down to run the Chinese grocery store. What other details are you interested in? Like, did you ask other questions about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I was just trying to get a sense of how many buildings, how many people, or how many families were in your
Yeah,
neighborhood.
yeah. About two or three hundred total Asians in that area. Um, It wasn't very large. It was just
Yeah,
one corner. But what's interesting though is now that Detroit is in this, some would say like a Renaissance thing or a revival state, they've actually been trying to redevelop the Chinatown. So the building that our restaurant was in has sat empty for the last 20 odd years. But then a new developer came in last year and put in $3.5 million to renovate it. And just to show you how iconic our restaurant was, he actually tracked me down in LA and asked me if I would reopen the business. And I thought about it for like 5 seconds. I was like, oh, I was like, wait, I can't do this. I'm on a book tour, so I wasn't able to do it. But the state of Michigan has now set aside $1 million for a beautification project for the neighborhood. So I mean, there's some bubbling of it, but really there's no place to live. I mean, there's all the apartment buildings burnt down. I mean, so they really started from square one. I mean, real scratch. So we'll see.
well,
Oh, and sadly, my great grandfather had three wives, and so each one of the families had a restaurant. The My family was the first wife, so that restaurant closed when my dad passed away, sadly. But then the second family's, their restaurant is called Chin's. Oh, you were asking me why we're Chung's. But anyway, the
Yes.
second restaurant was called Chin's. And that restaurant was opened in 1953, I believe. Um, and they're actually closing down this month because the matriarch just passed away about a year ago. And so sadly, the city is, you know, pressuring them to upgrade a lot of stuff. And because it's an old building, they just don't have the money to do it. So they're actually going to be closing down that restaurant, sadly.
So Chung was an in-law of your.
No. Oh, and we have a connection also to some of you guys from California here. Do you guys know Benson Fong? Benson
Yes.
Fong was,
Yeah.
yeah, he was my grandfather's brother-in-law. So Benson Fong married a Chin, Gloria Chin. But what was your question? Oh, Chung's.
Yeah.
So the situation with Chung's is that my great grandfather opened up the restaurant, and he had two kids from that first marriage, and that was my grandfather and my grandfather's sister. My grandfather's sister was last name was Chung, and so we just took his name. Um, but what's interesting, and I talk about this in the book, is that he actually was a paper son. And so even though the restaurant was called Chung's, there really wasn't any real Chung's in the building, right? Because I can't remember what his birth name was, but in Detroit, the largest family was the Yi clan, mostly Yi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were very, very few Chins. There was like maybe 5 or 6 Chin families, and that's partly why our family was so close to Vincent Chin's family, because there just weren't a lot of us, you
Yeah.
know. So we were part of that. Is it Jihao Oakton? Is that the family association?
That's the association for the Chan, Wu, and Yuan families. Actually, in an earlier kind of informal note to you, I mentioned that my own grandfather worked in Detroit as a cook.
Yeah,
So
yeah, in the 30s.
where, I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no idea. But who knows? Yis and Chungs might be related. Uh, uh, Back to a question I had earlier. The favorite dish. You mentioned in the book almond chicken.
yeah.
Tell us about that.
I actually did a podcast episode for America's Test Kitchen on this. And so it's this wonderful dish that we have in Detroit, which is basically white chicken meat, a fillet of white chicken meat, breaded and deep fried, and placed over a bed of iceberg lettuce, chopped lettuce, and then ladled with a really wonderful Asian infused gravy, and then sprinkled with crushed almonds and slivers of pea pods and water chestnut, and then served with a bowl of white rice. It's just, that was our best selling dish. But
So is that comfort food for you?
totally comfort food. But the whole episode for the America's Test Kitchen was sort of the the origin story for this dish, because my grandmother used to say we invented it, right? And so I had to go through and figure this out. If not, if we did create it or not. But I could never get to that proof. But what I was able to uh, ascertain was that the dish really took off in the 60s, when I think I mentioned earlier how they destroyed Chinatown and the black community, and they both moved into the same community. Almond boneless chicken is basically, you guys have wasio op here, right? Wasio op, almond pressed duck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, so sometimes people will call it wasio gai, but it's almond boneless chicken. But it's basically almond pressed duck. They just, instead of making it with duck, they made it with chicken, because duck isn't a very popular dish out in America, as in other parts of the world, but chicken is, right? And particularly for black communities, white meat.
It sounds like chicken fried steak.
It kind of is, right? And so
Okay.
so that's what it is. It's because Detroit had a lot of Southerners, black Southerners. It really is just fried chicken with Asian gravy. And so it's sort of a story about how these two communities, displaced by the city, really helped promote this one dish.
You mentioned the mayor was a customer.
Yeah, the mayor actually played a pretty important role in my life, because you guys all know the Vincent Chin story, right? Do I need to repeat that here?
I think most people know that just quickly, he was a young engineer who was murdered.
Yeah, it's a very important story historically for Asian Americans because people talk about it as the start of the Asian American civil rights movement. So, you know, I was a 14-year-old kid when that happened, and as I mentioned, we were close friends. Oh, so let me say the case. So the auto industry was struggling in the 80s. Vincent was an engineer going out to celebrate his upcoming wedding. These two white auto workers come in to the same bar that they're at, and they're overheard saying it's because of your mother blanks that we're out of work. They're kicked out of the bar. These guys get in their car and they literally drive around the streets of Detroit for half an hour trying to find out, trying to find Vincent. And sadly, they see him sitting outside of a McDonald's, and they take a baseball bat out of their car and they bash his head in and they kill him. Well, we found out that very next morning, that he was in the hospital struggling for his life. And when you're a 14-year-old kid, and you know somebody that's in the hospital like that, you're going to want to check the newspapers, right? You'll check the TV, the radio to see what they're saying. The media didn't cover it at all, that day. They didn't cover it the next day either, or the day after that, or the day after that. It took them 12 whole days before they reported on that story. Meanwhile, everybody in the Chinese community was coming into our restaurant asking, what's up? What happened with this? And, months later, when the judge came back with the sentence that these guys would only have to pay $3,000 fine, and they wouldn't have to serve a single day in jail. Um, and the judge's rationale was you don't put these people in jail, these type of people in jail, white middle class people in jobs. It just really stuck out to me that, it's because he doesn't know who we are, right? He doesn't see us. He doesn't know our story. He doesn't think of us as deserving of equal rights. And so I said, well, okay, well then I'm going to see what we can do about telling our stories. And so that's when I went from being a waiter to a writer. You see that I did that like one letter. I switched from being a waiter to a writer, and I lugged the typewriter from the back office to the dining room, and I just started writing these letters to the editor about this story. And the mayor, Coleman Young, the first black mayor in Detroit ever, he had a organizing background, right? A grassroots organizer. He saw me typing one day, and he's like, "What are you doing back there?" And my dad's kind of a troublemaker, so my dad's like, "Oh, he's writing these angry letters," and I'm like, "They're not angry letters, just whatever." And so, Coleman Young actually said, "There's nothing wrong with anger, right? Sometimes you need it." And as Buddhists, we are taught to like let go of anger, right? Like to not have these negative emotions. And it was just really interesting to me that, he was actually telling me this opposite opinion that anger is something that's important to have in life, that you need it to sometimes motivate you to do things. And I just never considered that before. And so he did have a profound impact on me growing up.
Did you work with Helen Zia, Asians for Justice? No.
No, I'm more Chinatown, the people that I know working on the case.
One more question, and then maybe I'll.
Do you want me to, was I supposed to read a story or not?
Well, why don't you read a story? What do you think? What do you like? What's the most?
I like reading the story about my mom, but I don't know if people here, what percentage of people
Oh
here.
yeah. Well, a lot of us here are, not just about history, but about family stories and family history, and our social environment that I think many of us here in the audience grew up in your kind of environment also. So I think it would resonate with a few of us.
Okay, there's a little bit of a setup to this, so if you guys don't mind, I'll tell you I'll set the scene for you.
Okay.
So the Vincent Chin murder sort of set my freshman year in high school. My senior year was defined by a different murder. One of our favorite customers was this guy named Alan Canty. He came in at strange hours by himself, uh, told us he was an ER doctor. Turned out he was actually a famous psychiatrist who's coming to the area to hire the prostitutes. And he was trying to break off with this one girl, and the pimp got so upset that he also took a baseball bat and bashed his head in. And then he took a Ginsu knife and just chopped up this guy's body and littered it all across the freeway. That combined with the fact that AIDS was killing, gay people, and anytime you ever saw a gay person in the news was they were in the hospital dying from AIDS. I did not think that I had a very long lifespan. I thought that I'd be dead by the age of 30. And so I didn't understand the point of going to college. But my mom, who had an arranged marriage, came to America, had to drop out of high school, never got a chance to pursue her own education, really wanted us to, go to college. And so she had this mantra of work hard, obey your elders, and be quiet. Like, that's what she just said to us all the time, work hard, obey your elders, and be quiet. And I knew how much my mom really wanted us to go to college. So I eventually rationalized what would be me giving up 4 years of my life for a woman who's given up her whole life for me. And so I said to my mom, okay, mom, I'll apply to college, but I'm only going to apply to one school. And if I don't get in, I'm not going. And she said, okay, fine. You apply to Michigan. And I applied, and sadly, I got in. And so I ended up going to college to Michigan. I didn't know what I was going to study. I was also one of those kids that had to work full time and then go to school at night. And, at night, there's a lot of creative writing classes. And so I ended up just, taking a creative writing class. And then I looked at the schedule, and I suddenly I did the math, and I said, hey, if I only wrote poetry and if I only wrote haikus, I could graduate in fewer than 500 words. And that was my whole plan for graduating college was, just writing haikus. And I must have written a really good haiku because I got into the creative writing program, which only took 20 people at U of M. And so this is the story that I'm going to read from that, okay, after that had happened. So pick up my classes. Oh, one thing is that all the chapters are supposed to be like a Chinese menu. So this may not make sense, but this is chapter M7. Being a creative writing major made me the literary expert at Chung's. That was inevitable as my dad asked every customer, have you met our number 3? He's the writer in the family. Every time he mentioned my program, the number of students accepted got smaller and smaller. At some point, I expected him to say I was the only one on campus even allowed to own a pen. One week, one of our waiters was out sick. My younger siblings were busy with their weekend activities, so I was the one called in to help. I jumped at the chance to have some home-cooked meals for a few days. I was running around the dining room, refreshing our customers' silver teapots, when a white middle-aged woman reached into her oversized bag and pulled out a colorful hardcover. Have you read this book? It's so good. The Joy Luck Club, the recently released novel that featured a bunch of old, sassy Chinese ladies who like to eat, gossip, and play mahjong, could have easily been set in our back kitchen. Every time I came in to help at the restaurant, another diner, usually older and female, cited the most memorable characters, lines, and scenes. They all wanted to know if I was working on something similar. I was writing poetry, but they didn't care. To them, all writers are the same. They would squeal, you could be the next Amy Tan. My mother turned out to be the biggest pusher. She rarely had a book in her hand, but the success of the Joy Luck Club convinced her that her life was a bestseller too. She followed me around the dining room, dropping stories from her childhood, the same ones I'd heard growing up, but now she recounted them as if she was auditioning for her own books on tape. One night, after seeing how our waiters sometimes pulled tips together, my mom shared an oldie. When the communists marched south, they targeted my family. My uncles and grandpa were rich in America, so the Red Guard called us traitors. My stubborn grandma didn't want to leave her big home, so when my parents escaped to Hong Kong, they left me behind to keep her company. The communists hated me and my pawpaw. When I was 4, they made me watch as they forced my grandma to climb the old banyan courtyard. Then they pushed her off into a pile of broken glass. For visual, my mom rubbed her knees. Another time, standing at the water station, she launched into her own nautical tale. When I was 5, my uncle in America paid $25,000 in renminbi, a king's ransom in people's money, to local fishermen to ferry our remaining family out of China. After a long ride tucked under the planks of his fishy fishing boat, we came up for air. But we weren't in Hong Kong. The traitor had turned us into the authorities. In jail, I had to sing Communist Party songs to earn extra rice for me and my grandma. Another chapter came as we stood beneath a painting of the Chinese countryside. When my pawpaw and I were freed from jail, we found that the officials had given away our home to peasants. We were forced to live several villages away in a dirt hut with 3 other families. Whenever we went out for a pail of water, my grandma had to bend low to keep her head below the soldiers. Once again, she gave me a demonstration, this time bowing her head. Granted, my mom's epic saga interested me. Who wouldn't be intrigued by tales of prison cells, guns, and stolen ransoms? Even the parts about her mundane life in Hong Kong after she was reunited with her parents and siblings were amusing. But these were her stories, not mine. She had to tell them, not me. I was in school to find my own voice. I sat and listened, but that was as far as it would go. Toward the end of the summer, as I was at the back table sipping my red pop, stockpiling poems for the upcoming semester, my mom sat down. Before I could say anything, she started talking. I was a top student in Hong Kong. When Pepsi came to town, they held a big contest for students to draw a picture of their own school. Mine was the best at Sacred Heart. I won 6 cases. There were so many bottles, I had to give some to the nuns. I threw down my Parker pen, the one I treated myself to after getting into the program. Yes, and they kept burping all day. It was so funny. You told me that story over and over, and I don't even like Pepsi. I prefer Coke. My mom's shoulders shriveled. The shine faded from her rosy cheeks. You don't want to hear my story? I tensed up. I do, but I'm behind on my own stuff. Between working at Drake's, the Journal, and saving the world, my schedule was packed. On top of that, my workshops in the fall were advanced. Still insecure about my place in the program, I put pressure on myself to create more interesting writing by staying up late and scribbling in my notebook every detail of my life. But no matter how hard I tried, working harder could not produce a better poem. My mom lifted herself off her seat. The glint in her eyes orphaned me. Her 42 years of life flashed before my eyes. She'd gone from Guangzhou to Hong Kong to Detroit and spent the past 2 decades raising her 6 children in a hostile foreign land. She tried to prove that her life had worth, that it hadn't gone unnoticed, and here I was, the ungrateful son, writing it off. Her lips quivered in a soft murmur. I hastily picked up my pen, backtracking. Go ahead, Mom. I'll write it down this time. My mom bowed her head, as if I were one of the soldiers holding a gun to her temple, ordering her to sing. No, you go on. You do your own thing. I reached out my hand, but by then she had disappeared through the black swinging door, leaving only the rattling from the kitchen, the clanging walks and rumbling dishwasher. I sat there upset at myself for being so inconsiderate. Everything I had done in the past 3 years had been for her, but it seemed as though I had failed the final test. My education wasn't just to help me get a better life. It was for my whole family. We were a team. We were the 8 immortals. How could I let them down? I needed to make things right, but I knew that, like most disappointments in our house, apologies were never spoken. Only deeds would bring about reconciliation. So, that's the story from my mom.
So, so, so you grew up with a little bit of guilt. Did you live up to? So, what did your siblings end up becoming? Is there a doctor or a lawyer?
There's a doctor. She got one.
She got one doctor. Okay.
Yeah, one doctor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, she's yeah, my mom's had a tough life. I mean, she got the short stick on a lot of stuff. And so writing the book was as much for her and telling her story as it is for me telling mine. I know that she felt like there are a lot of people out there who live these lives and make so many sacrifices, and nobody ever sees them and recognizes the work that they do, right? And I think that for me, telling my mom's story is a nod to that, right? And recognizing, hey, there are these wonderful people there. Wow, someone just posted something in the chat. My grandfather owned the Oriental Cafe in downtown Detroit in the early 1900s. Wow, that must have been maybe one of the first restaurants, right? I mean, it had a dance band and bar. Henry Ford, wow.
That is something.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I'll ask that person later on when they left Detroit.
Well, why don't we, since it's 7:45 already, maybe Isaac, we could just open up the audio to the audience, and maybe we can have them directly ask questions. So this Wei Ling Louis, maybe you could maybe comment further. Oh, yes, Wei Ling.
Yeah, hi. Hi. My grandfather had probably one of the first Chinese restaurants in Detroit. And then according to my mom, it was a huge restaurant. It had could hold 500 people. It had a dance band. and Henry Ford used to and some of his engineers, I guess, used to come and eat there.
Do you have pictures from that?
I don't have pictures of the restaurant, but I do have a platter that I have from the restaurant.
Do you have the
It has
menu?
a logo on it. I don't know if you can.
Do you have the menu?
I don't have the menu. I don't know if you can see. Can you see that? I don't know.
There's a Facebook group, Detroit Chinatown. It'd be great if you could share that history because I know that's going to be a big thing that they're trying to do is to reclaim this history from that era. Um, when my
Okay.
book launched, the Detroit Historical Museum actually did a conjunction, an exhibit in conjunction with my book's release. Uh, and so they were trying to reach out to as many people as possible.
Well, my mom's passed away now, so but I mean, and all of my aunts and uncles have passed away too, because they all of them except one were born in Detroit, and then
Oh, you weren't born in
my
Detroit.
grandfather apparently took them during this. He actually had like two restaurants, I think, in Detroit. One of them was the big one, and then another one was a smaller one. And then he lost the restaurants during the Depression, and then he took the whole family back to China in
Oh, wow.
1931.
Oh,
And
wow.
then my mom was able to get back over here in 1940, I think 42 or 43 or
But
something.
they were all born in Detroit though.
They were all born in Detroit. We have a picture of the house that they were born in and everything. So,
Well, there's a Facebook group. Please contact me and I'll direct you to the Facebook group. Please join it
okay.
because I
Well,
know
how
that
can I what is it? I mean, how do I contact you?
I'm going to send my email.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an amazing history. I actually got contacted by somebody else. Do you have relatives in upstate New York or Westchester around there?
Yes, I have relatives in well, let's see, they were in Livonia and I can't remember that there's some little small places outside of Detroit.
No, but a month ago, I got contacted by somebody in upstate New York who said that their family owned the first Chinese restaurant in Detroit.
Oh, I don't know if this is the first Chinese restaurant, so I have no idea if that's it or not.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that email. I don't remember the particulars of what they said, but they also said that. So it's interesting to me because the number of Chinese, did get up to about 4,000. So there are quite a few number of families and a lot of restaurants, but they all scattered towards the suburbs very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my grandfather was also active with Dr. Sun Yat-sen. And so Dr. Sun Yat-sen, he helped raise money for Dr. Sun Yat-sen when during that time, because in Chicago and also in other places back east, from what my mom said.
Yeah.
I never met my grandfather because he passed away in China after they went back to China.
Mm. There is I'll mention this because you guys are all history buffs here, right? The local Chinese American group actually commissioned a history report in the 80s, right? And someone actually conducted these really great interviews with a lot of the people from the 20s and 30s, right? And so who were there at that time. But sadly, that manuscript is being held up. It's with Wayne State University Press, but the family of the woman that wrote it up, there's some legal disagreement, whatever, but it's a treasure trove of Chinese American history in Detroit that's just not available to people right now. Someone snuck me a secret copy of it, so I got to read it, but there's just amazing details. The other thing that I would say is that what was really interesting, again, because I wrote the book, I've had so many people come out of the woodwork, asking me for details and stuff like that. But I met this one woman in Seattle who volunteers for the National Archives, and she kept like badgering me to like, you should look up your family's history in the National Archives. And I was like, oh, I don't want to because everything in my book is all like passed down to me orally from my mom, right? And other relatives. And there's a certain history to that, right? Like, and you just never know if that's actually true, what these people are saying. So I just never really wanted to like, see how accurate my book is or not. But I finally broke down and I contacted the National Archives and I was able to get these really amazing records. And I would highly advise this for anybody else too, because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, whenever you were a Chinese person and you were trying to go back to China, they made you do these really extensive interviews, right? To
Yes,
confirm
my mom.
work. And so we have all these interviews now from my great grandfather detailing what was in his grocery store, which he opened in the 20s, right? But like, you know, what was on the shelves, how much he charged for it, what hours they ran, like who were their customers, right? And then they also had to interview like a couple of white people to verify this stuff. And they also included photographs, you know, from then. So it's really for people here on this Zoom session who are interested in their own family's history, the government may actually have some of the stuff that you guys are looking for, and including yourself, Wei Ling. I don't know if you've had a chance to contact the National Archives, but they may have a lot of records of your family's journey.
Well, yeah, my cousin, he was a docent at Angel Island.
Mhm.
He recently passed away in January, but he and his wife were docents at Angel Island. And my mom and my aunt, when they came back, when I think had to go through Angel Island.
Yeah, so the records may be in the government.
Yeah. So we have a lot of interesting family histories here. But are there some other questions? I don't see any on the, well, maybe one just came on here. Trying to open it up.
There's one from Warren.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no, I haven't heard of that restaurant. But again, I think the most important thing right now is like, you know, we should be saving all this history, right? And at some point, what I want to do actually, if I ever had more time, is I want to do a picture book where I would reach out to all these Chinese restaurant families and ask them to send in a few pictures and maybe some text, and we could just have a book. Like maybe this is something you guys can do, the Chinese Historical Society. Like, you know, you guys can take this as a project. It's just, you know, it'd be a wonderful coffee table book of like, you know, maybe Chinese restaurants from around the
We
country.
could document those 4,000 Chinese restaurants across the country.
Yeah, you guys should. I mean, that'd be wonderful. You know, I'm working on another film, in addition to working on my next memoir, which is a follow-up. So in 2005, I was writing for the Disney Channel, and then my parents were sadly in a car accident back home in Detroit. And then my dad passed away. And then my mom, you know, was severely injured. My brother Chris, who's like the golden child in the family, he immediately whisks her off. He's the doctor. He whisks her off to the Bay Area to help her recuperate. By the end of that first week, all my other siblings decided they were also going to move to California. And so I was left back in Detroit trying to decide, do I go back to Hollywood and pursue writing TV, or do I stay in Detroit and take over the family business? And so that book is called Leftovers. So I'm working on that. But I'm also working on another documentary for PBS. I don't know if you guys saw the piece that I made on Dear Corky, Corky Lee, the photographer. But PBS picked up that film, and they liked it so much they asked me if I had another artist I'd like to do a film on. And so I found this guy named Warren King. So take a look at his stuff. I think you guys will be really amazed. So I'm making a film on him. I'm done filming. We're in post-production, and that film I have to deliver to them next month before I right around time. Yeah. Well, I won't finish before I leave for Europe, but yeah.
Sounds great. You've been keeping busy. Some of us have the Corky Lee book.
Yeah, one of the events that I'm doing in Paris is actually to show the Corky Lee film.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
Yeah, I'll post on my schedule too.
Yeah.
In the chat, if you guys don't mind. This is my schedule. If you guys happen to be in Europe, or if you guys have friends in Europe, please send them the way, because nobody knows me in Europe. So I don't want to have like 5 people in the audience. So please tell all your friends.
Yeah.
That's my European tour that starts May.
You'll be catching up with Taylor Swift and her tour. Well, no, I think it's great that there's this audience that's really interested in maybe the sociology or the personal history. Uh, oh, something you talk about in the book, by the way, is your coming out at a certain age. Maybe you could, I mean, you can share as much as you're comfortable with, but what was that like for your family?
Well, that doesn't happen in this book because I didn't come out. That's actually in book 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
now you have to read book 2, Eugene.
Well, stay tuned. Yeah. So I don't see. Yeah. So wonderful idea for restaurants. Oh, by the way, I know somebody who has a collection of matchbook covers from the Midwest, Great Lakes area, and there were just dozens and dozens of restaurants from Thunder Bay to Cleveland to
Wow.
Chicago and Toronto, and
Wow.
Dearborn,
Yeah.
and all those places nearby. So there were more restaurants than we know about. So if Chung's was this iconic place, I think it's terrific.
I think we might have a handful of that, but we really don't have a lot of memorabilia because that's just not what happened. I mean, we also don't have very many photographs because we just never thought to take pictures, right? And that's the sad part for me is I don't really have much. And with all the media appearances I've been doing, so many of them keep asking for photos, and I don't have any. I don't have a single photo of me in my waiter's outfit, as a kid, working in the restaurant. It's quite sad to me that we just never once thought to take a picture of this. And so that's partly why I'm doing all this stuff. The other thing that I'd like to say is that, with all this politics going on in this country right now, it has impacted my book, right? I am getting banned in places. I've had events canceled out on me because, these universities have lost funding because of what Trump is doing in DC. So, any support that you all can do to help, promote the book, tell your friends about it. If you guys are part of a book club, please, sign my book. If you guys are part of your local library, make sure they have copies of my book, because it's a scary time now for writers, writers of color, queer writers, because we're under attack, and so we're trying the best we can to preserve this history of our community, but
Well,
it doesn't make it easier.
It just seems so like there's so much interest in our community right now. I mean, we have inquiries for walking tours. We have researchers, people doing master's theses and doing PhD dissertations. So they're coming out and asking these questions. So there's a lot of research and writing going on. So I think
Hopefully, I mean, the attacks have really happened in the last few months. So I don't know if you're noticing anything in the last few months. But yes, it seemed that there was a lot happening beforehand, right? There was interest. But I think that, ever since January, when the new government came in, I think there's been a chilling effect. So hopefully you guys haven't encountered it as much. Hopefully you guys will still, have interest from people. But I will say that, there's a big difference in the last 6 months.
I would hope that we are all thinking and caring individuals and human beings, and we will continue to speak and ask questions as we should. So,
Well, just to share our history, right? Our
Yeah.
history should not be threatening to anybody.
no, nothing's going to chill, what I'm going to have to say. So
Yeah.
we should continue. Um,
Yeah.
So we encourage everyone to write and write it down. We tell young people to do that. So I don't see anything else in the chat. Am I missing something? I'm just and I have new eyes for those of you who are wondering. I'm not.
There's a question about AI, but I don't really get involved in AI.
Yeah.
And especially having AI producing pictures. No, I'm not going to recreate, some film picture using AI.
No, no need to. But yeah, no, I think it just really feels, as we said early on, there are many of us out here who are restaurant brats or grocery store brats or laundry brats. We grew up, we didn't go to a lot of parties. We didn't go to football games, went home after school to go to work. So we did get paid, but we got fed. And that was it.
Well, I hate to tell you this, Eugene, but my family did pay us. So,
Wow.
well, it's because it was split between my dad and his cousin, right? And because we had 6 kids who were all working, but his family didn't work. So he married someone who was not Chinese, who just wasn't interested in working at the restaurant, and therefore their kids were not made to work. So the only thing that seemed fair was to pay, right? So I did get paid. Sorry.
Ducky.
Okay. By the way, we heard earlier from Wailing about 500 seat or 500 person restaurant. How many people could your restaurant accommodate?
A little shy of 100. It wasn't a super large, but it also wasn't a small place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good.
Pretty decent size. And then how many people worked in the kitchen then? Did you have
Well, yeah, during the busy hours, I think we'd have like 5 cooks, not including my grandmother who was in the back doing, cookies and, other stuff like egg rolls, like the long stuff. And she had a helper,
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. Well, it's past 8 and I don't see any new questions really. So why don't we'll hang it up for tonight. Oh, no, I just see a question now. Let me see here. Former HK Kung Fu actress and owner of a restaurant in Queens.
No, there's a lot of famous Chinese people that are restaurant kids, like the Joy Luck Club. Both Ming Na Wen and one of the other ones also is a restaurant kid. Rosalind Chow. Lisa Ling grew up in a Chinese restaurant. Aquafina grew up in a Chinese restaurant. You know what I mean? So there's Chinese restaurant kids are out there. You know what I mean? We're holding our weight, in terms of.
That's your brotherhood or sisterhood, all out there.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, I've enjoyed hearing your presentation here, and
well, thank you, Eugene.
Yeah,
thank you. Good work.
Thank you. Yeah, no, well, we enjoy. It's just stories like yours really are what how my wife says, what built the country, but in a way it did build society, and our communities are all the more rich for that. So we're all growing and learning, and I think your story is just really worthwhile hearing. So
it really has been a pleasure. I mean, I don't know if there are other aspiring writers here or memoir writers here, but you write your book and you just never know how it's going to be received. And it just the response I've gotten to the book has just been so overwhelming. Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. I was on NPR. CBS Saturday Morning News did an 8-minute segment. I've been, on NBC News like 4 times. I mean, PBS NewsHour. It's just been really, really, just a joyful ride. And anything I can do to promote the Chinese American history and Chinese American experience, I'm happy to help with. And the work that you guys do here is also should be acknowledged. Eugene, Susan, Isaac, Ricky, all of y'all. So kudos to you. And anytime I can be of help to what you guys are doing, feel free to reach out.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for an enjoyable evening, and look forward to hearing more and seeing more writing come out. And here's the cover, everyone, and it's a really nice looking design. And, no, it's really eye-catching. So I really like it. Anyway, well, I'll let you all enjoy the rest of your evening. We're having some great weather out here, and so we'll everybody stay warm, stay dry, stay healthy, and have a great evening.